The story of Adam and Eve is widely known, but certain aspects remain shrouded in mystery. While Genesis recounts their creation and the original sin, it also mentions that Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. Who were these figures who, while essential to humanity's continuity, receive so little attention? Among them arises the question that has echoed through centuries: who was Cain's wife? This video delves into the depths of biblical narratives and apocryphal traditions to explore the role of Adam and Eve's daughters in the formation of humanity. How did they contribute to the initial growth of the population? And what does their story reveal about life during the earliest generations? If these questions spark your curiosity, like this video and join us as we uncover how the gaps in the biblical narrative invite us to a deeper understanding of our origins. The mention of Cain's wife in Genesis is brief, almost hidden between the lines. Yet, this enigmatic figure has become one of the most intriguing questions in the biblical narrative. When Cain, after killing Abel, is sent to the land of Nod, the text states that he knew his wife. Who was this woman? And how is it possible that, so early in humanity's history, there were other people with whom relationships could form? These questions pique curiosity and shed light on the gaps in biblical accounts. The search to unravel this mystery begins by analyzing the context of Genesis itself. Adam and Eve are presented as the progenitors of all humanity, and the text mentions that they had other sons and daughters. This suggests that the initial population was formed from their descendants. Therefore, Cain's wife, according to this interpretation, would have been his sister or a niece. Such a practice, unthinkable today, was necessary and accepted during humanity's early days. However, this explanation faces challenges. The idea of consanguineous marriage, though understandable in its time, raises ethical and scientific questions that have fueled debates for centuries. How could the Bible, as a book of wisdom and morality, address such a delicate issue so naturally? These questions reveal that the story of Cain and his wife is not merely about genealogy but also about interpretation and cultural understanding. The mystery deepens when considering that Cain founded a city after his exile. Where did the inhabitants of this city come from? Could there have been other populations beyond Adam and Eve's descendants? Or did this city begin with Cain's siblings and nieces, growing over time? These questions lead to further exploration in scripture, apocryphal traditions, and even biblical archaeology, each offering different possibilities for understanding humanity's beginnings. This question is not just a theological enigma but also an invitation to reflect on the limitations of human knowledge before the divine plan. Even with so many interpretations, the figure of Cain's wife remains a mystery that challenges scholars and inspires debate to this day. Can the secrets left in the gaps of the biblical text ever be fully unraveled, or are some mysteries meant to remain as part of faith? Like this video to continue diving into the complexities of biblical narratives and uncovering the mysteries of the book of Genesis. Genesis, the first book of the Bible, lays the foundation for the beginning of humanity. Within its pages, it mentions that Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. Although the text does not detail all their names, it provides clues that help explain how the earliest generations formed the Earth's initial population. Cain, after killing Abel and being exiled, married one of these descendants, possibly a sister or niece, as was necessary for the continuity of the human lineage. This explanation, logical for its time, may feel unsettling today due to the implications of consanguineous marriage. Yet, in the biblical narrative, such practice was inevitable for humanity's development. There were no other families or populations outside Adam and Eve's circle. Each union represented not only a familial bond but also a crucial step in expanding the divine plan. It is interesting to note how the Bible handles these events with simplicity, without delving into the details that raise doubts among modern readers. This approach has sparked questions over the centuries. Why didn't the sacred text bother to explain the origin of Cain's wife in greater detail? Perhaps the narrative's purpose was not to address every historical detail but to convey messages about morality, sin, and redemption. Adam's genealogy, mentioned in Genesis, offers important clues. Seth, for instance, is highlighted as a son who gave rise to a righteous lineage, contrasting with Cain's descendants. This separation in the narrative reinforces that the focus is not merely on biological continuity but on the spiritual values passed down by each lineage. Even so, Cain's wife remains an intriguing figure whose exact identity is unknown. Apocryphal texts and Jewish traditions help fill some of these gaps. The Book of Jubilees, for example, suggests that Cain's wife was Avon, one of his sisters, or Kelma, according to other sources. While these works are not part of the biblical canon, they provide fascinating interpretations that expand our understanding of the practices and beliefs of that era. The story of Cain and his wife is not just about genealogy, it reflects the challenges faced by humanity's earliest generations. How did these first families handle the responsibility of populating the earth? What moral dilemmas did they confront? The identity of Cain's wife has been the subject of debates and speculation for centuries. While the book of Genesis briefly states that Cain knew his wife after settling in the land of Nod, it provides no details about who she was. Apocryphal traditions in ancient texts, such as the Book of Jubilees, attempt to fill these gaps with interpretations that enrich the narrative and offer new angles for reflecting on humanity's earliest generations. The Book of Jubilees, an apocryphal work valued in some Jewish and early Christian traditions, identifies Cain's wife as Avon, one of his sisters. Other texts suggest Kelma, also said to be Cain's sister. These accounts, though outside the biblical canon, expand our understanding of how ancient communities interpreted Adam and Eve's genealogy. They also highlight the importance attributed to women overlooked in the official biblical narrative, emphasizing their essential role in humanity's continuity. These theories not only enrich the context but also raise new questions. Why did the Bible choose to omit details about figures like Avon or Kelma? Perhaps the intention was to focus the narrative on its primary themes, such as Cain's sin and the need for redemption. Yet, apocryphal traditions show that ancient communities were curious about the details left out, creating stories that reflected their quest for understanding. Another intriguing aspect of apocryphal interpretations is how they humanize biblical characters. Describing Avon or Kelma not just as names in a genealogy but as women who lived and faced the challenges of a world still in formation makes the narrative more tangible. These figures symbolize the silent but crucial role of women in building humanity's earliest families and expanding its population. These theories and interpretations also reveal a significant cultural aspect, the need for ancient communities to connect their oral traditions to the biblical text. The names and stories that appear in apocryphal books reflect an effort to fill gaps and answer questions about humanity's origins. Thus, Avon and Kelma are not merely speculative characters, they represent how the ancients sought to understand and preserve their history. Studying these traditions challenges us to reflect on the impact of the gaps in the biblical account. Do the omitted details invite a deeper faith that embraces mystery, or do they encourage curiosity and the search for answers? Continue watching to discover how the practices of the time helped shape humanity's expansion. The practices of consanguineous marriage, implicitly mentioned in Cain's story, are intriguing and often challenging for modern readers. In the context of humanity's earliest generations, these unions were not only inevitable but essential for survival and population growth. Adam and Eve, as the first parents, gave rise to a population that had to marry within the same family to ensure humanity's continuity. However, the cultural and genetic impact of these practices raises questions that go beyond the biblical narrative. At humanity's beginning, marriage between siblings or close relatives was necessary to form communities. There were no other families or tribes, and the prohibition of consanguineous marriages had not yet been established. This practical necessity, however, has sparked debates throughout history, particularly when compared to the later Mosaic laws that condemned these practices for ethical and health reasons. This contrast between humanity's origins and the evolution of social norms reflects its cultural and spiritual development. From a genetic perspective, early human generations faced a very different scenario than today. The Bible describes Adam, Eve, and their descendants as possessing extraordinary longevity and physical vigor, which might have minimized the risks associated with consanguineous marriage at that time. However, the biblical narrative does not detail how these unions influenced the health of subsequent generations, leaving room for scientific and theological interpretations and debates. Culturally, these unions also played an important role in forming early human communities. The Bible mentions that Cain founded a city, suggesting that he and his wife not only formed a family but also laid the foundation for a society. These early communities symbolize the beginning of humanity's social and economic organization, marking the point when Adam's lineage began expanding and shaping the world. Over time, marriage practices evolved as humanity grew. Mosaic laws introduced prohibitions against consanguineous marriages, emphasizing the importance of protecting health and promoting genetic diversity. This transition reflects a new stage in humanity's social and spiritual development, where norms aligned more closely with principles of ethics and justice. The impact of these initial practices remains a topic of reflection. How did the decisions of the first generation shape humanity's future? What lessons can be learned about balancing necessity and ethics? Adam and Eve are introduced in the biblical narrative as the progenitors of all humanity, and the impact of their lineage continues to resonate across generations. After the tragic conflict between Cain and Abel, the Bible introduces Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, as the precursor to a righteous lineage. Genesis describes Seth as a sign of renewal and continuity, bringing hope amidst the consequences of sin. Seth's lineage, in contrast to Cain's, is characterized by the pursuit of justice, devotion, and closeness to God. Seth is not just a name in the genealogy, he is a central figure in the narrative of restoration. After Seth's birth, the Bible mentions that men began to call upon the name of the Lord. This marks a significant spiritual transformation, where worship and communion with God became the focus of future generations. The extraordinary longevity of these generations also reflects the unique period in human history, where connection with God and the preservation of the lineage played fundamental roles. Seth's wife, identified in apocryphal traditions as Asherah, also carries great symbolic importance. Representing the continuity of Adam and Eve's lineage, Asherah is mentioned as a woman of faith and devotion, contributing to forming a lineage that sought to live according to divine principles. Though rarely mentioned in the Bible, her role highlights the importance of female figures in stories of faith and in building humanity's earliest communities. This lineage, which culminates in the figure of Noah, highlights the spiritual legacy of Adam and Eve. Through Seth and his descendants, we see the preservation of a connection with God, even amidst widespread human corruption. The story of Noah and the flood, which would come later, reflects both divine justice and mercy, preserving those who remain faithful. In this context, Adam and Eve's legacy transcends the original sin and transforms into a story of redemption and continuity. The impact of this just lineage goes beyond the biblical text. It symbolizes humanity's constant struggle to reconcile with God and live according to His will. Each generation faced its own challenges, but Adam and Eve's lineage shows that, even after sin, there is hope for restoration and closeness with the Creator. This legacy invites reflection on how spiritual heritage shapes choices and faith. What significance does the legacy of Adam and Eve hold for today? How can this story of hope and continuity inspire new generations to seek lives of justice and devotion? These are questions that remain alive, inviting further exploration of the depth of biblical narratives. The stories of the earliest human generations, including Cain's wife and the daughters of Adam and Eve, remind us that the gaps left in biblical narratives are not merely silences but invitations to reflection and discovery. Every figure mentioned or omitted carries a purpose, challenging us to explore the depths of tradition and faith. From the enigma of Cain's wife to the roles of Seth and Asherah in preserving a righteous lineage, these narratives illuminate the foundations of humanity. These accounts also lead us to consider the evolution of morality in society, from the challenges faced by the earliest families to the practices that shaped humanity's future. How do these stories continue to impact our understanding of faith, lineage, and identity? Share your reflections in the comments. Who do you think Cain's wife was, and what impact does this story have on how we view the early chapters of Genesis? Check out our latest videos to explore more biblical mysteries and their cultural and historical implications. Until next time.